Guys, I am going to start a new read aloud with you because we just got the news today that school will be closed throughout the duration of the school year. And I should have plenty of time then to record reading this book. Now, it's a nonfiction piece, Lincoln. Oh, I guess you see that backwards. How Abraham Lincoln Ended Slavery in America by Harold Holzer. And I'm reading this with permission from the publisher, which is HarperCollins. And I thought I would just go a totally different route than what we last read, which was Wish. Again, that was fiction. And now I thought I'd read some nonfiction about one of my favorite people, Abraham Lincoln. So this is the prologue, okay? A King's Cure, January 31st, 1865. For weeks, President Abraham Lincoln had waited anxiously for Congress to act, waited, counted votes, held last-minute meetings, made promises, offered deals, and when necessary, twisted arms. But now, as Abraham Lincoln sat in his corner office in the second floor of the White House, he could do nothing more than wait a bit longer for the news to come at last from Capitol Hill, a mile and a half away. Members of the Senate and House of Representatives were finally making their decision. Would Congress vote to approve or reject a 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would abolish slavery throughout the United States? Remember, abolish means get rid of. The Constitution was the country's original and most important set of rules and laws. Many Americans believed it should never be altered, and no addition to it had been approved for more than 6 decades. Lincoln believed that after 4 years of civil war fought over the issue of human slavery, it was time to remove slavery from America forever. Just a few months earlier, Lincoln had won a hard-fought campaign for re-election as president. In just a few weeks, he was scheduled to take the oath of office at his second inauguration. In the nerve-wracking days leading up to the historic vote, Lincoln had tried to conduct business as usual at the White House. He welcomed a group of Philadelphia women who had raised great sums of money to care for wounded soldiers. He accepted the gift of a vase made of leaves gathered from the Gettysburg battlefield. He celebrated the Union capture of Wilmington, North Carolina. He began making plans to meet with Confederate leaders on the subject of peace. Lincoln even rode up to the Capitol himself, not to lobby for the passage of the 13th Amendment, but to attend a special concert in honor of the volunteers who helped nurse and feed the troops. There, the president was so touched with a singer named Philip Phillips, offered an inspiring tune called Your Mission. He asked to hear it sung one more time. Lincoln also always loved a sentimental song, but even music did not make him less nervous about the country's future or less determined to fulfill his own mission to end slavery. The president was exhausted. Lincoln seldom got to bed before midnight those days. He hardly got to see his family, ate too little, and worked himself nearly to death. He had too much on his schedule and far too much on his mind. It was obvious to many that over the past year he had lost too much weight. His face looked gaunt. Although not yet 56, Lincoln looked far older than his years. And then came the glorious news. Months earlier, despite pressure from Lincoln, the House of Representatives had failed by a mere handful of votes to approve the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. A two-thirds majority in both houses of Congress was required for the measure to go to the states for ratification. On the first try, the U.S. Senate had passed the amendment, but the forces of freedom had fallen short when it came to the House. This time, however, enough representatives changed their minds to change history. Lincoln had actually helped change some of those minds himself in an unusual exercise of power and persuasion for presidents of that time. But still, he had not been sure he had done enough. Finally, on January 31st, Congress voted to send the 13th Amendment to the legislatures of all the houses of the Union. Now, if 3/4 of the states approved it, the amendment would become an official part of the U.S. Constitution, which had accepted the existence of human slavery since it was first created in 1787 and had added no new amendments of any kind since 1804. The next day, February 1st, 1865, a clerk brought to Lincoln's desk the official congressional resolution on passage of the 13th Amendment. Lincoln read the document carefully. He was no doubt overjoyed by the language it contained. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime, shall exist within the Union. As he could see, the official notice boasted the signatures of both the Speaker of the House and the Vice President of the United States, the Vice President acting in his capacity as President of the U.S. Senate. Almost by instinct, Lincoln seized a pen and added his own signature as well, writing in bold script, "Approved, February 1st, 1865, Abraham Lincoln." Perhaps he failed to realize that presidents were not required to sign resolutions on constitutional amendments. Maybe he simply wanted to add his autograph to those of the others. Either way, he was not about to be left out of this great moment or this priceless document. He had fought too hard for its passage. His name belonged on it too. Whether or not he was required or entitled to approve it, he signed his name. A few hours later, a band of musicians gathered outside on the White House lawn and began to serenade the president. The mood was joyful. Defying the winter cold, exuberant citizens joined the throng and began shouting for Lincoln to appear. Before long, the big windows on the second floor of the mansion opened wide, and the tall, thin figure of Lincoln, dressed, as always, in black, appeared in the moonlight. Not even his broad smile could disguise his tragic appearance. He looked more tired than ever. His once thick beard was shaved back into a scraggly cluster of whiskers on his chin. Great black circles ringed his sad eyes. A few strands of gray flecked his black hair. When the cheering subsided, the president began slowly speaking to the crowd in a loud voice. Microphones had not yet been invented. He had no written text. He spoke from the heart. Lincoln thanked the audience for its compliments, but insisted that tonight's occasion called for congratulations not to him alone, but to the country and the whole world. The 13th Amendment, he declared, had been desperately needed. Passage meant that another terrible disturbance, another bloody civil war, would never again tear the country apart over the issue of slavery. Yes, he was also proud of his Emancipation Proclamation, now 2 years old. The proclamation had begun the important work of ending slavery, but it had not gone far enough. It applied only to states fighting a war against the Union, and not to loyal Southern states like Kentucky, Lincoln's own birth state, the place of my nativity, he called it. There, slavery still existed, protected by the original Constitution. Even in the Confederacy, the proclamation had freed only those slaves in areas the Union Army had captured over the past 2 years. And it did not apply to the children of those slaves. As Lincoln put it, the proclamation alone simply could not outlaw slavery everywhere, but the amendment would. It was, in Lincoln's words, a king's cure for all the evils. To another hearty round of loud applause, he declared, "It winds the whole thing up. It was a great moral victory." Within a few days, however, it became clear that it was a great victory that Congress did not particularly want to share with the president. On February 7th, the U.S. Senate actually passed yet another resolution complaining that Lincoln's approval had been unnecessary. As one irritated senator explained, presidents simply had nothing to do with amendments to the Constitution. Their signatures were not required, and Lincoln's was not appreciated. Worst of all, the criticism had come from the lips of a senator from Lincoln's own home state, Illinois. In fact, the man who offered these ungracious remarks had defeated Lincoln himself for the Senate 10 years earlier. If this latest vote upset Lincoln, he did not allow it to show. By then, Illinois had done something far more important. It had become the first state in the Union to approve the 13th Amendment. Just hours after Congress voted, Illinois had voted too. Within weeks, as other states rushed to approve it as well, the 13th Amendment became much more than a resolution adopted by Congress. It became a precious object, copies of which ordinary Americans could purchase to display at home. Artists began producing pictures of the actual resolution, complete with portraits of all the congressmen and senators who had voted for it. Lincoln's picture almost always appeared at the very top, and legal or not, his signature usually appeared at the bottom, just where he had written on it in ink on February 1st. From then on, and for all time to come, the name Abraham Lincoln would be associated with the amendment that, once and for all, did away with what some people call America's original sin, slavery. Once it was ratified, 4 million enslaved people were free forever. Sadly, when the required number of states approved the amendment 10 months later, Lincoln was already dead. By then, no extra vote in Congress, no petty complaining could ever separate Abraham Lincoln's name from this grand achievement. It had been a long time coming. Lincoln had hated slavery from his earliest days, but not until the last few months of his life did he summon the boldness and political genius to strike the blow that legally killed it. The road to freedom proved long, bumpy, and uneven, rutted with detours, obstacles, and frustrating delays. It took most of his lifetime for Lincoln to overcome the prejudices he grew up with and to discard the caution that always marked his leadership style. But when he did, he not only grew and changed, he helped America grow and change as well. So tomorrow, chapter 1, the making of a liberator. See if you can look that up. What is a liberator? Liberator. A liberator. See you tomorrow.